The Legend of the Condor Heroes came out February 20th, and I watched it and it was great. I watched it with my parents. They like Chinese movies, and so do I. I'm also a fan of Xiaozhan. And now I can finally say I've watched the movie and have my own opinions and do not have to just listen to other people's reviews helplessly, not knowing all the bad things they said, if they were true, or if the good things they said are just fans being viewing things through a rosy filter. And now I can say I think it was a really good movie. It was worth our ticket prices. We all enjoyed the show. It was exciting. The whole 2 hours, I asked my parents, hey, did you ever fall asleep? Because they often do that when I take them to the movie theater, and they were like, no, how are we supposed to fall asleep? It was exciting the whole time. I wanted to make a reaction video immediately after I watched the movie, but for some reason I couldn't import my audio into this other editing app I had, and I also lost the password to my YouTube account. So there were a whole bunch of issues, and I've decided to not let that hinder me and still make a video, even if it's a little bit late. But the movie is still in theaters, so it's not too late. One criticism I've heard was about the acting of this movie, and having watched it, I think there were no instances where anyone's acting felt weird or awkward or out of place. I liked all the actors, and I especially felt like not only the main actors, but also all the side characters, including all the people who played Genghis Khan and his sons and daughter and followers. All the actors were so well chosen. However, I do agree with the comments of this one Chinese reviewer who said, due to the movie editing style being one where it's more choppy and the scenes are jumping around a lot, so there isn't a lot of room for actors to continuously show emotion and showcase their acting skills. So it's a movie where it doesn't showcase extremely good acting, but it is a movie like any other work of film where if you're particularly bad at acting, people would notice, and no one was bad. Everyone played their characters like they're supposed to. One thing I worried about going into the movie was the pacing. There were some people who were complaining that it was too jumpy, too choppy, too confusing. And after having watched the movie, I didn't feel that way. In the beginning of the movie, there was, I think, a short 10 minutes where it was the male lead and female lead narrating and summarizing large portion of the novel for the sake of the audience. And after that, I think the real story started. And even though the style of acting was in a more choppy way, I think the story was continuous and it was not confusing, it was not boring, and it was exciting to watch because it was all battle scenes involving armies. And the army scenes were interspersed among scenes of the leads having personal journeys and battles and stories. And I think that gives the movie a vibe where all the main characters felt like there was a great war looming among them, even as they live their lives and experience their loves and friendships. And that is, in a way, I think one of the themes of the movie, where war is something that is inescapable to people who are living their ordinary lives. There was only one particular part of the movie where I felt like the editing was a bit strange, and that was when Xiaozhan was living inside the Mongolian army camp, and he says to Genghis Khan, "I need to find Huang Rong, the female lead." And the Khan was like, "Okay, you can go." And then he goes to find Huang Rong for like 30 seconds, and nothing happens in those 30 seconds. He doesn't find her. And then Genghis Khan is like, "Oh, I need you back in the army." So he calls Guo Jing back in the army. So it felt kind of pointless. What was that for? Leaving the army for 30 seconds and coming back? But that was such a short amount of the movie. It felt like it was within 1 minute. And I don't think that caused the whole movie to feel like it was full of pointless transitions. Another point of discussion was whether this movie was a good interpretation of the original novel. And I think most people expect that because this is a 2-hour long movie, it was only going to focus on a part of the original story, and it was impossible to cover the whole thing. I think the difference between my dad and I both having watched the movie at the same time was he had no idea which part of the movie, of the novel, the movie was going to focus on. So he thought it might focus on the most famous kung fu or martial arts masters within the novel and how they fought among each other at a battle. And I did not think that because I had read other people's comments before going into the theater, so I knew that it was not going to focus on that. It was in fact going to focus on the final battle at the very end of the movie, where Genghis Khan was planning on attacking Song, and Guo Jing, the male lead, who is ethnically Song but who has grown up in Mongolia his whole life with the Khan as his father figure, how he had to deal with the two sides where he both call home now wants to fight each other, and how he finally stopped the Khan. So I think that is a part where if you were a fan of the original novel and you had no idea what part it was going to focus on, it might take you off guard. So I think it's good to have to have a warning ahead of time which part of the novel we're focusing on without spoilers. And you have that here. Or you could be like my mom, who also went into the movies without knowing anything, but she simply had no expectations. She simply knew that this was only going to be 2 hours and it was going to focus on whatever it could. She was open-minded. She really liked that the movie was very beautiful, and she also really enjoyed the character Hua Zheng, who is a Mongolian princess. She is a daughter of Genghis Khan, who is a love interest for Guo Jing in the original story, but this is a brand new interpretation where in the original story she was always very demure, who was very obsessed over Guo Jing. But in this story, she was much more fiery and much more like what we would imagine a Mongolian princess to be. She was also the favorite of many audiences of the movie. Another part that my mom enjoyed was that she was pleasantly surprised by how well Xiaozhan could ride a horse. I think she saw some video clips talking about Chinese entertainment and how many actors today actually don't know how to ride a horse very well, and the camera would be only focused on their face during the horse riding scenes. And she was like, "Oh, Xiaozhan is really good at riding the horse. He was riding the horse a lot in the movie." And I guess that's a positive, but at the same time, I never expected a movie of this quality with this director and main leads to ever not have the main leads know how to ride a horse. My dad also enjoyed the movie, even though it didn't focus on the battle of the masters like he expected. His favorite part of the movie, and I think a lot of people thought this part was very well shot, was the parts focusing on the Mongolian army. It showed how well they were trained, and it also showed a lot of the battle formats that would exist in the army. So he loved the scene where Guo Jing was having a major fight that was in the climax towards the end with the main antagonist, Ouyang Feng, and their fight was shattering the army format everywhere. But as soon as that fight ended, the Mongolian army noticed that the Song army was coming out to attack them. So they immediately went back to format. And it showed how quickly they were able to turn themselves around. And when they were inspecting specific peoples of interest, they would have the people with the lances in the front in a circle slowly advancing, and then in between their gaps there would be people with the shields and the short swords coming out quickly to protect them and also to investigate further. And those scenes were a lot of fun to watch. And here is where I have a gripe with a lot of the negative reviews I've read about this movie, and that is a lot of people acknowledged how well the army scenes were shot and how exciting they were, but instead of admitting that this is one of the positive things about the movie, they would present it in a way as to say, "Oh, all the other scenes were kind of crappy. They might not have been shot by the same director, right? If we didn't have such a popular actor as the lead, maybe we'll have more of these army scenes." I think it's good to have your own opinion, and not everyone has to love the movie, but I think it's very frustrating when a lot of people are sort of spinning a good thing into a bad thing. I think it is a good thing that the most impressive part of this movie is the army scenes instead of, let's say, maybe the love scenes between the male and female lead. I think it's actually expected for this director. I think in a lot of his other movies, he would sort of put the focus of the story not on the traditional female and male lead of the story, and he would find his own angle that he is really interested in telling a story in. And I think it's okay that the male lead Guo Jing and the female lead Huang Rong is sometimes in the background of the story of this movie. Going back to the movie, another thing I really liked was Xiaozhan's acting in this movie. I felt like he was in character. I really believed that he was Guo Jing. And there were two criticisms I remember of people on his acting in this movie. And one is someone mentioned, and I think this is a kind criticism, that in his later roles, Xiao Zhan sometimes appear like he's acting a little bit too hard, where he doesn't seem natural. And that is something I agree with on one of his other works. But here in this movie, I didn't feel that way, because the personality of his actor, Guo Jing, is someone who is extremely earnest, to the point of maybe sometimes appearing a little bit dumb, but he's not actually dumb. He's just way too earnest and way too honest and way too direct a lot of the times. So I think his acting here is not the result of acting too hard, but actually the result of him fitting into the character he's playing. I also enjoyed the accent he had, which non-Chinese speakers might not notice, because again, this character is someone who is ethnically Song, but who grew up in Mongolia. So he's fluent in Mongolian. There were lots of Mongolian lines in this movie. I'm really curious if there's anyone who speaks Mongolian who watches this movie. But when he speaks Mandarin, which is the language of his mom and dad, it almost felt like he was speaking Mandarin very fluently, but with a slightest hint of Mongolian accent, because he is someone who actually lived in Mongolia his whole childhood. And I really loved that, and I thought it was a very subtle detail. Another criticism of him that I've heard is his martial art movement design. And to some degree, I agree with this. I don't think it is his strong suit. Despite having trained, especially for this movie, I think there is a gap between someone who has had years of training versus someone who has trained just a few months for the movie. However, I did really like the fight design, the choreography of the scene where he saved his brother, who is a younger son of Genghis Khan, Tuolei. I thought that fight was very fun to watch. Whereas the end climax, where he had the big fight with Ouyang Feng, I think the impressive part of that fight was the response of the Mongolian army around them. And these actual two martial artists, while their moves were designed, I didn't think they were the main watching point. And I would not disagree with someone who thought the movement design there didn't make them look the coolest. And for people who are complaining that there were not enough close quarters combats between the martial artists, I would say that's more of a personal preference, because even in the original story and the beloved 1983 TV drama version of The Legend of the Condor Heroes, the masters of martial arts, they were all masters of what they called inner strength. So it was kind of like Tai Chi, where they were able to manipulate the energy around them and causing massive damage to the environment around them and also to their opponent. So in this movie, the male lead is not starting as a trainee and slowly increasing in his martial arts abilities. He was already a master by the 10-minute mark of the movie, basically. So he already mastered that art, and therefore, in his fights against his opponents, it is done in the movie with a lot of special effects showing how the energy around him is being manipulated. I think that is what I expected, and I enjoyed those scenes. And I think my dad enjoyed those scenes as well. It is also how he expected a fight between the top masters to be. And the reason that I liked the fight scene where he saved Tole earlier in the movie was that was a scene where it was a combination of the energy being manipulated by him, displayed using visual effects, and also him using his environment to maneuver around his enemy, and also some close quarter combat and some use of wire work as well. So that was my favorite fight scene of Guo Jing in this movie. I think it really showed the training that he has gone through to prepare for this movie. Just like how the fight scene between Huang Rong and Princess Huazheng showed the training they received to prepare for the martial arts scenes. And while the climax battle scene between Guo Jing and Ouyang Feng was not my favorite in terms of showing off skills, it was still a very cool scene that showed how the fight between two grandmasters was affecting the people around them, because they were essentially doing it while Ouyang Feng was trying to break through the Mongolian army and kill Genghis Khan. And Guo Jing was there to stop him. So throughout the fight, their fight was disrupting the army formation. It was hurting some of the people in the army, and there were people who were trying to be in a hurry to get out of their way, but there were also people who were Guo Jing's friends and who tried to help him within the fight. So that was an element to watch out for. It was also a scene that showed the difference between these two masters of the martial arts, where Ouyang Feng was not concerned about hurting any innocent people. He just wanted to win, but Guo Jing wanted to fight in a way that had the least impact on the people that he loved. So part of how he fights is to not hurt the people who are his friends. And that was a moment to show that even when you're both martial arts masters, sometimes what you believe within your heart still makes a difference. Moving on to the next slightly controversial point is some watchers didn't like that they thought the vast majority of the movie was a love story between Guo Jing and Huang Rong, where they lost each other and they were trying to find each other, and that lasted way too long, and it was only towards the end something exciting happened. And I completely disagree with this point now I've actually watched the movie, because yes, in the beginning they did lose each other through some misunderstanding, and they were trying to find each other, but it was not a love story, because while they were apart, they each had their independent storylines where they were meeting new friends, where they were saving their old friends, and where they were both feeling that war is coming and it was something they would have to do something about. So even when they were apart and were looking for each other, their lives were happening and the story was developing. and they each had their own individual adventures. And finally, I really loved all the scenes with Genghis Khan. And I'm going to go on a tangent here. I think Genghis Khan really deserves to have a good movie or a good TV show made about him. Because I don't know how the movie industry is in Mongolia, but in Chinese media, I think the only time I see Genghis Khan in a film production, in a story, is within the story of the Legend of the Condor heroes. That's the only place he appears. And he is such an important and impressive person in history. I mean, how many movies have we made about Henry VIII? Come on. I think Genghis Khan is not any less interesting than Henry VIII. He's even more interesting, I would argue. And he hasn't, I can't think of a movie where he is the lead. So back to this movie, I really love the scenes between Guo Jing and Genghis Khan because the actor chosen plays the Khan so well. He looked so cool and so convincing as this tyrant of the world. He was a leader with a presence, especially on the battlefield. Yet at the same time, he was playing this powerful yet loving father figure to Guo Jing. It was also so convincing, and I loved it. And if you've seen the trailer where Genghis Khan asks Guo Jing, why do you want to help the Song people from my attack? Because even though you're from there, they killed your dad and they tried to kill you and your mom, and you and your mom escaped and came to Mongolia where I raised you. I was the one nice to you. So why do you stand here and try to stop me now? And I was so curious and so nervous about what was the answer Guo Jing gave to this question, because I was afraid it was going to be a more tropey answer, maybe something that was very grandiose.
I would have to say world peace.
Very not down to earth. And when I watched the movie, I got my answer and none of my fears came true. It was a wonderful and an unexpected answer that Guo Jing gave. I didn't know how the original novel was written, but to me the answer was unexpected. It was very personal. Guo Jing appealed to the Khan's personal experiences that had similarities to Guo Jing's experiences, and that was the reason that he was stopping the Khan, even though the Song people were never nice to him. Please check out this answer yourself in theaters. And I also loved the scenes between Guo Jing and Tuolei. Tuolei is a son of Genghis Khan. He's also a sworn brother of Guo Jing. And there were very few scenes with the two of them, but they were so good because the actor was so convincing, playing the prince, the younger prince, who had older brothers above him, of a tyrant, but who is also someone who's different from his brothers in that he's not only thinking about winning, he's also someone who cares deeply about his friends. The scenes between Guo Jing and Hua Zheng were beautiful. I think I will leave their story for the audience to discover in theaters. It was beautiful because they were childhood friends who grew up together, but they couldn't be lovers because, first of all, Guo Jing is in love with Huang Rong, but even beside of who he loves, A marriage to Huazheng, which Genghis Khan wanted, means officially joining his family and being someone who will help him conquer the world. And for Guojing, his ideal is peace, and he would not want to help Genghis Khan conquer the world. So this is the background of Guojing and Huazheng, and how their feelings are affected by all these events and backgrounds will be in the movie for you to see. So the night after I watched the movie, I was talking to my friend about having watched the movie and really loving it, and she was telling me about how the reviews of the movie are quite negative in China. And I used to feel sad about how many negative reviews there are of the movie and reading all those comments online. But after watching the movie, I am no longer sad because I know that I enjoy the movie, and now I don't have to be someone who just listens to other people's reviews and not being able to respond, because I have integrity. And now I can respond having watched the movie. And I can feel happy about Xiao Zhan doing a good job in this project. And I was also happy to hear that my parents enjoyed it, even though they were not in any fandoms. And they were the enjoyers of the 1983 version of the story, so it means a lot that they also liked this 2025 story of the Condor heroes. Ultimately, I'm still very glad that Xiao Zhan got to experience the making of this movie. And I think all the things that he learned, including how to ride a horse really well, all the martial arts training, the wire work training, the bodybuilding, are things that will stay with him long beyond this movie, including things like how he came up with the accent of Guojing. I think all of these things will help him in his future career as an actor. I want to watch this movie again while it's still in theaters, and I would encourage anyone who's interested to give the movie Legend of the Condor Heroes, the Gallants, a try. Enjoy!